Well, hello and welcome to Wilcom's video series for EmbroideryStudio E4.0. My name is James Timmons and I will be instructing this class. Today we're going to talk about a very important matter in the differences between the object data versus the stitch data. And these are files that we create inside of the embroidery software and files that we import in from either our saving the files to a machine format or a third-party format sending us designs. And there seems to be some confusion as far as how this works inside the program, and so I'm here to kind of give you some insight on the differences between these stitch types and inside the program. And I'm going to click here. This particular design here is an original EMB file that was digitized in Wilcom, and I'm going to scroll down here and bring up the color object list so we have a visual of this so that we can see what we're looking at on the screen here. So with this, and I just want to share with you when we go in and when we are digitizing designs and saving them as the EMB files, and for those of you who are not familiar with those, the EMB files is a Wilcom proprietary software file extension. Each manufacturer of embroidery software, they have their own unique file extension, and we don't have access to all of them. We do have some. If you want to view what types of files that you can open up in your program, we're going to navigate over here to the file drop menu, and we're just going to go in and we're going to choose open. And from here, I'm just going to go in here to where the file type is here, and I'm going to click the down arrow, and here you will see a list of file extensions here from Wilcom, EMB, different machine types of extensions here also. These are your machine types here listed, and so all of these machine types here you're able to save your files to or to export those files out to these specific machine types here. And whatever you don't see here on this list, we don't have access to those particular file types, and but everything that you do see here is all of the file types that you can export out to and read in to your program. Okay, and that's going to be here on this list that we're scrolling down here, and I'm going to cancel this out. So this EMB file here, the first question sometimes that we get basically is, well, how do I know it's an original EMB file? Well, it's important to know that you can always check to see what type file that you're working with basically. And you have the option here. I'm going to navigate up top here. You have a little icon here up top, and this is your design properties, or you can press Alt P on your keyboard to access this. And as I left click on this, I'm going to go over here, and in my properties I can scroll down. You want to make sure that you're in not the summary but the design tab here. And so as I scroll down this list here, and right now as I scroll down this list, it's giving me information about this particular design. I can give it here a title here, height, width, stitches, it has the colors, the number of stops in the design, colorways, trims, color changes, whether it's applique or sequins, and under the bling is an EMB grade, is what we're calling this actually, and this is new to E4. And So this here, as far as the embroidery grade here, you can see beside it here, there's a letter A. Okay, whenever you see this from this list, okay, that will signify that this is an original native EMB file that was digitized inside the Wilcom software. And this is the type of file here that I would be dealing with or working with here. And this is, of course, the best type of file that you want to work with. And one reason is because you have the ability, because it is an outline file basically. And if you have an outline file or like a wireframe, you're able to increase and decrease the size of that design pretty much. And the only thing that you'll have to do once those adjustments are made, whether you decrease the size of the design or if it's something that's a left chest and you're increasing the size of that design, is you'll have to go in and change the settings for the stitch types, because of course as those objects gets larger on the screen, you may have to change a running stitch then to a satin stitch, or you may have to change a satin stitch to a tatami stitch. Okay, and so that is the thing that sometimes has to happen if there's a really large upgrade from the original size, like from a left chest to a full back. Like right now, this particular design here, once I draw my box around it here, is telling me that this it is, I'll change my metric system here also to inches. It says that it's the width of this is 1.973 and the height of this is 3 inches tall. Okay, that's the size here that I have for this design. So if my customer calls back and says, you know, we need to make this larger, we want to stitch this on a bag or something like that, or something large, something much larger from the left chest size, all I've got to do is go in and I can change the size by just navigating down to the bottom, and I can make this so the height, we're going to make it 8 inches. So I'll type 8.0 and I'll just press enter, and the size of the design increases to 8 inches. Now what happens here also is I go up top here, I'm going to undo this. Now here with the original size that we're working with here, the stitch count here is 5,394 stitches. Now I'm going to go back. Once it increases in size, of course, the stitch count has to change. Okay, here now we're looking at 21,908 stitches, and the reason because of this, again, we're dealing with outlines. Okay, if I want to see the outlines and I don't want to see the actual stitching on the screen here, I'm just going to press S to hide all my stitches here, and once I press S, it shows me the wireframe here of the design. And the wireframe is important because with the wireframe you are able to adjust and change the size of that design with the modifications to match, basically, which means if something's really tiny, you may have to make it larger at that point now, because now it's such a larger different size. And so you may have to go in and if it's a running stitch, you may have to change that to a satin stitch, and as I said earlier, if it's a satin stitch, you may have to change that to a tatami stitch to make it work for the size or the new size that has been created inside the program. This is the easiest file here to edit also. You can just go in, you can zoom in as I'm rolling my mouse button forward here. You can click on an object, you can press the H here. It's going to show you the node points here that were used to create the shape with, and it's going to show you the stitch angles here. So it's easier for me to go in if I need to go in and edit something like this by going in and just moving the stitch angles, or if I need to add a stitch angle, I could always press my control key down and move my mouse on top of the outline like this and left click my mouse button. Of course it will add a stitch angle like this. Okay, and I could delete stitch angles also with this. And so this is the beauty of being able to use the EMB file. And so this particular file that you have, whenever you're creating new designs, you should always save those files as EMB files first before you delete that file, because you can always save a EMB file to a machine file, okay, and make that work, but you can't go backwards with it. In other words, if someone sends you a DST file and that the original file that they sent to you was a DST file, that file, even though you may save it to an EMB file, it's not going to be a true original EMB file. It'll still be the basic stitch file that was sent to you beforehand. Okay, and I hope that makes sense. Again, if the original file that you get, that you open up on your computer, if that file is in fact a DST file or any machine type file, if you save that machine type file as an EMB file, it will never be the original EMB file. Okay, and because of this, you will be limited to your editing capacity. Okay, so, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you also. So just keep that in mind. So here again, I'm going to press my number 1 here and my 0 key here for a full view here. And so just keep that in mind. I'm going to press S here to bring my stitches back. So again, the EMB file here is going to be the one file that you want to save. You want to make a copy of it and save it. If you're going to save it, a good idea is to save all of your designs maybe to an external drive, okay, or the cloud somewhere, and you want to make a backup copy of that one also, because if that file is lost or deleted for any reason at all, you will have to start over again. Okay, if you have the DST file saved, it still won't be the original EMB file, and again, that will limit your ability to go in and edit, change the size of that design. Okay, and again, the EMB file here, the original, if you go in, if you click on your design properties or Alt P and you click on your design tab, okay, because when you go in, it may be on summary, make sure that you click design. And if you scroll down with this EMB grade as A, that will confirm that this is an actual original EMB file that you're working with. Okay. The next file that we want to take a look at is, let's say that we have a design here, and we save the design as a CND file. Okay, and that means we went in to File, we went to Export Machine File, and for our Save as Type here, we went in and we saved this as a Milco condensed file, which is a CND file. Okay, that is also will be an outline file, but you still be limited, because keep in mind, it's still not an original EMB file. Okay, and so that will also be classified differently also. Again, this is our B design, and I just opened this up actually from the save, and so this is what we have here. This is how it came in. Okay, and again, looks different here as far as the colors go. They basically go back to whatever the default palette's going to be on the bottom of your screen here, and so it'll bring those objects in as that. But if you look here, you'll see some differences here also. You see some lines here, okay, and with these lines, basically they more than likely were trims, but with the CND file, as you're bringing them back in, as the system interprets these files, you may see something that looks like this. Okay, and so and you may see them looking like there will be a running stitch more than likely here that you see here as well. So now keep in mind, now if we go in and if we choose the design properties for this design saved as a CND file, export it out as a CND file, we're going to navigate over here to our design drop menu here under the design properties, and as I scroll down here, you will see the EMB grade here is at B. Okay, and again, this is a different file from the original EMB file. Okay, here is the grade for this one, again, is going to be B, which means that at this point here, if I'm going to get this design ready, I may have to go in now and click on these objects here, and if you select them here and press your delete key, you see what happens here. It turns into running stitches here like this, here, and here. So let me undo this one. And so just keep in mind, I'm going to press S here to hide the stitches. Now it looks a little different here also, because right now with these, as I go in and click on the lines here, going to the next letter, and press S again here. So right now, so I've got all of these stitches here, running stitches here on the design. So with this, you know, you may have to go in and make some changes with the with these also. Now if I go in, I'm scrolling down here my color object list, and I have my letters here, and so keep in mind that for these, as I select them here and I press S, see here's the wireframe from those, and it looks a little different here than what the EMB file looked like here, because here you're seeing all of the underlay stitches here also in this particular file here, because it was saved as a CND file, which is a condensed format for Melco. So right now, if I want to, now this is the choice that you have to make for these types of files that you bring in, and you'll have to go in and edit them to get them to do exactly what the original EMB file did actually. Or if this is all you had, you would have to go in and make changes here to get these to look okay, or you'll end up having to go in and redigitize the lettering, especially if you don't have the EMB file for those letters. So at the same time, because as I look in my color object list here, you do see more automatic stitching, like your running stitches, your satin stitches here, and that'll make it easier to go in and edit something like this here, because you see the automatic stitches here actually. So being able to see the automatic stitches, and I'm just going to go up top here, I'm going to click on my select tool here, and I'm going to select with the polygon select. I'm just going to draw a polygon around the text here to see what we can do with this. Now as I press enter here, it goes in. Now what it did here also, you want to make sure that everything, every item under that is going to be selected here also. Here's my color. I could also just click off of it here and just click on 5 here also, which will select that particular color. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, when you go in, I'll go to my properties. I can scroll up top here, and in my object properties, if I go in, I can scroll to my connectors, and right now I want you to look at this here. Now this window here looks different than what the EMB file would look like. Okay, and this is very important. I'm going to navigate over. I'm going to click back on the first design as the original EMB file, and I want you to look at the properties with this EMB file. Okay, they look totally different. Okay, and so with this, let me click this. I'm going to lock this here by clicking the little tab here. Now, and I want you to look at this, because right now, if I wanted to go in, I've got my jump here set to 7. I've got the trims turned on here also, telling the machine basically that if there's any space between any objects that's greater than 2 millimeters, it's going to do a trim here. And I've got my tie-in stitches. Very important, these are not turned off, that they're turned on. And if I click my arrow here and go to my tie-off stitches, you want to make sure also that those are not turned off. Okay, and very, very important to remember that. So you want to take a look at that and make sure that everything is in order here for that particular file type. Again, this is what you see here in the properties for the original EMB file. Okay, and as I go back here to the saved CND file, as I click here, now with this again, as we go in and look at just the text with this, having just selected the text inside the connectors, the run here is selected. Okay, and what that means basically, you know, it's going to do running stitches here, because everything that you see here in the true view is going to stitch out. Okay, and so because of this now, I will have to go in and change this back to my jump here. Okay, and again, I'll check it back here to run. Here it's recognizing those as runs here because it's a saved CND file. Okay, so you will have to go in and make modifications on these by going in here, selecting the objects here that you have the lines running through here, and changing those to jumps like this. Notice also that the trim after here is turned off. Okay, and for that, looking at this here, basically it should always have a rule to it here. And right now, if I click on this trim after here and make it, you notice on the original EMB file, this was at 2.0. Here, look at this. This is the maximum stitch length. Some machines they max out at 12 millimeters. It won't do a stitch longer than that. If that happens, then your machine, if the stitch is too long, your needle won't be moving at all. It'll just be kind of jerking and not moving at all. So it'll try to make a movement, but it can't because it can't recognize the stitch because the stitch is too long at that point. So watch what happens here now. In the EMB file, this was set to 2 millimeters. Now, right now it's set to 12.7. So I'm telling the machine, if there's any spaces that's greater than 12.7, I want you to do a trim. Of course, it's not going to do a trim because of the design size, and this is a very long stitch here. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to highlight this area here, and I'm going to type in 2.0 and press enter to change that back. Okay, now your tie-off stitches here also, look at this, they're turned off. Tie-in stitches, that's not good. So we want to go in, we want to make sure that these stitches are turned on, because basically when it comes in and it stitches these. Now you do have, if you look here, it does have locks on the actual outlines here. Okay, so with the CND file, as you see, so it does have locks here. They're not being recognized here by the software. Okay, because these files here, let's say the original file that was saved from, basically. So that's why you always want to run a stitch out to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do on your machine as well. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. So wherever that exit point is, as I select here and press H here, wherever that exit point is on any item here, you just want to make sure that you have that tie-in stitch here, or that tie-off stitch here. And this is here, you can see the tie-off stitch here at the end of this one. That's there, signifying that there is a tie-in stitch there. So you just want to make sure when you go in, looking over these objects, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do here. Now, what you can do also here with these, if I go in and if I change this, the previous connector, now for these types here, when you go in and you are saving this out to a machine file, you just want to make sure that these items here are selected. Now here also you have that 12.7 here again. We'll change that to 2.0, and you have your stitch length here also. That should be 1.0. Okay, so you have objects throughout the design here that need to be modified. So if you go in, once you run that sample, if it's not doing what it's supposed to do, you just want to make sure that you go in. Now here, because I have multiple items selected here, it's not giving me, it's not staying here where it is. So with this, again, here for my lettering, if I go in again and select my text here on the screen, here, just want to make sure that these items here are corrected. And that's just the tie-in stitch. You got to click the down arrow here also and adjust that top stitch here also before trim or color change. If that next connector, and you have these numbers here that I would change, just making sure that everything is doing what it's supposed to do here actually. Okay, you have that stitch length here for those lock stitches at 1 millimeter, and there's 2 of them here. So again, for the lettering, And for everything else that you go in, you will have to go in and adjust these. Here I'm just doing this by color. So when I go in, just making sure that everything is doing exactly what it's supposed to do here. Now here for the text here, I'm going to click the text here. And what I'm going to do also, I'm going to go up to edit and I'm going to cut this. Okay. And I'm going to go back to edit here. I'm going to paste that back here down to make sure everything is now these areas here, like you have the your stitch that you have like this. Now we're just going to go in. I think maybe something that was missed. I'm going to press S. You have an option here also to go in and just take away, like when I go in here and I click on the underlay stitch here, I can delete the underlay stitch like this. I can go in now, and once you do this, and this is totally up to you as far as how you want to work this, but with this you can go in and now you can actually add underlays to the outlines here also. So that's an option that you have. You can leave them just like they are, or if there's any problems with those, you can just select them, you can get rid of them, and you can add your own, because again, these are outlines here that we're working with here, and that's up to you as far as how you want to handle that. Okay, so you have the option here because we're using outlines. Remember also, keep in mind now that everything is still separated here. When I click here and pull out the underlays, everything is still separated, even though it's still a CND file, okay, with the outlines. And again, the good thing about this is that when you go in, whether you decide to leave those in or to just delete those and add your own underlay stitches to those, that's entirely up to you as far as how you want to handle that. Okay, because you can go in here, there's like an edge or an underlay stitch here. If I wanted to go in, I can just delete those. All of these extra lines here in this, I can select those and I can delete those. Okay, and you will have to go in and make these adjustments here with this design, or those designs that you bring in, you will have to go in and make adjustments with those. Okay, as you here for the legs, as I select those, they should be this color. And so as I go in, I can select and change the color of each of those items. As I go in, and I'm going to go also to design, and I'm going to do a auto start and end. You want to make sure that your items here are set. Apply auto start and end, maintain automatically here, and make sure that your center is in the center of the hoop. So that white crosshair should be in the center of the design. Here. And we have a line here. I'm not sure where this particular line here is coming from, but we'll go in and take a look at that. And let's see here. If we select it here, let me select go in, click on the polygon, select. Again, notice that when I go in for this type of design, that these designs, these particular designs here, go here, just checking to see where this line here is coming from, and here we have some, there it is. So that, I'm going to undo this again. So this particular design here now, because the this particular stitch here, after it did the lock stitches there on that one, again, just making sure that you go in, anything that's not needed there, you can go in, you can delete those. You can always add your own underlay stitches to those. But for this one here, that outline stitch here that I just selected there, and you have this one here also. So these stitches here, let me undo this also here. Okay, and this is just to show you sometimes these are they're tricky because you have to go in and find out where those items are. And for this particular one here, because this is the last item here to stitch there. So once I select that here, I'm going to go into my connectors, and in my connectors again, notice that it's set to run here. Okay, so keep in mind that as soon as I click on the jump here, the trim after is set to off, which it should be if next connector like this. And so I'm going to have to go in and adjust these items here. Have this one now and here also. And so those two little stitches, it looks like they were added at the end here, are basically what's causing that line here to go in. So going in and selecting those and getting rid of those eliminated that line. So this is the process that you'll have to sometimes you'll have to do basically when you're bringing in a CND file. Anything that's not standard EMB file in original, this is something that you might have to do with that file. Okay, and so at this point, there's nothing wrong with this software itself. It's just that the design that was saved and the design that's being brought back in here is a new basic setup here for the grade of it has changed. Okay, and that's important to remember. Again, when you go in, you choose your design properties, you select design, and you can see what grade that file is that you just opened up. Okay, and just keep in mind that this file, any machine file, is not the same grade as a Wilcom original EMB file. Okay, and because of this, changes may have to be made in order to get that file to work properly. Okay, and just keep that in mind. Very, very important to remember. And here's, I press the S here. Again, you have areas here that you're working on here. And for these, I mean, as far as going in, sometimes you may have to go in and, because after this leg stitches here and I press my tab key, it does that little lock here and then it jumps here. So this little lock here, if I select that and delete that, now I should be able to go in as far as with this color here, which is color number 7, I can select my running stitch and I can start here from the one prior to it, and I can end that right here, and let me change the color of that to color number 7. And I have my sequence tools now that I can select this one, press my control key down, click my running stitch, and then this one, and choose 1, 2, 3 here to get that to work. Now, so now I have a running stitch going underneath that. Again, these are the things that you'll have to do when you're bringing in those other types of files that you're working with inside the program. So just want to keep that in mind when you're working inside the software. Okay, and so again, you have your outlines, and you also have, if I press S, you have everything's been separated basically. So you will have to go in sometimes and modify these areas like this. Okay, same thing from this one to that one here as far as going in. And if I select the leg here and press H here, have my starting position. Again, to solve this, I can use a running stitch here, choose color number 7, and again run from one object to the next like this. And I could again select the first one here, press my control key down, click the running stitch, the leg here, the running stitch here as I scroll up, and choose this one. And I'm going to navigate up top here to 1, 2, 3. And as you go in and you're adjusting and changing these objects here on the screen, just keep in mind that you also have areas like this. Okay, and these areas, if you're going to leave them in there, you can leave them in there, but just keep in mind that when you go in and you select those, you will have those areas that you might need to go in and delete. Okay, I'll press H here for this one. So here, even moving the starting point here didn't fix this one here. So again, when you have these items, you may have to go in and you may have to adjust those items here. So press Tab. And so you see you have a object here. So you may have these other areas here that may need to be modified with those as well. And you just want to keep that in mind as you're going in and moving these around. As you see just now, when I went and moved the starting point here for this one, I had to move it further inside like this, and it worked. Okay, and so again, these are things that you're going to have to do when you're bringing in these third-party files that are saved as machine formats. And again, this one here is the grade B, and this is opening up a CND file inside your software. Okay, now the next one that I want to share with you is as you bring something in as a stitch file with the object outlines turned on. Okay, and what I mean by that is this: when you go in and you have a DST file that you're trying to open up here, the way that you're going to open this up here, if it has the outlines and objects turned on, you will be able to go in and you'll see here inside your color object list, most of these they are automatic stitch files like your satin stitches. You may see running stitches here also with the red lines and the white dotted lines. But you're also going to see some stitches that look like this also. They have solid red lines, and on the corners here you'll see black dots. And what that means, those are manual stitches. Okay, there's a difference between the manual stitches and the automatic running stitches. Let me share with you what that is. If I want to go in and do a running stitch here, I can just select the running stitch here. I can click here. I can go all the way down here and click for my second point and press enter. Okay, and that's fine, because if I go into my properties of this, with that running stitch, because it's an automatic stitch, it has automatic tie-in stitches and tie-off stitches that it uses inside the program. I can change the stitch length of this to 3, 4. I can change the stitch length of that. Okay, and it's going to automatically do a lock stitch at the beginning for the tie-in stitch, and at the end for the lock stitch. So this is what an automatic stitch looks like here. Okay, I can add, change the stitch length to that. Now this is a manual stitch here actually. Now this manual stitch is just that. There's no automation associated with the manual stitch, and it means that if I go in, I can't click here and click down here for the second point, or I'm going to have a very long jump stitch on my machine. Here I can't even just select and start digitizing. I also have to type in or digitize a lock stitch also. So I'll go 1, 2, 3 here. Now I have to start digitizing, and I have to be careful, because if I click a point here that's too long, you see that dotted line? That's a jump stitch. Okay, that's the jump stitch. So notice the solid lines, but as soon as I go too far out, it does a jump stitch, and that's what those dotted lines are. And at the end of this, once I finish this, again, long jump stitches. So I have to go shorter, and once I finish this one, 2, 3. I have to go in and also put the lock stitches at the end of this. So these are very different stitch types here. For the manual stitch, if I go to my reshape tool, they look like this. They look like little blue squares like this. This is what the running stitch looks like. It's just, you have a line here at the beginning, a dot, orange is a little square, and one at the end. Okay, so you won't even be able to see the manual stitch when I select and go to reshape mode with this type stitch like this. I can only see this when I click on it here, or when I go to reshape mode and I click on that manual stitch is the only way, or go here to my color object list and click on it here and go to reshape tool. Okay, and so this stitch here, the different, again, very different stitch types. I can actually go in, if I had a design with all running stitches in it, I could actually go in and I can, let's say that I'm going to do a, let's see here. I have my spiral fill here, and if I go in to my properties with this and I adjust my density settings, they look like this. So they're running stitches. Now I can increase the size of this. I can make it real big just because of the fact that they're automated stitches here actually, because it's a running stitch. Okay, so I can go in and change the size of this and make it much larger. If this were a manual stitch item right here, I would be limited in my capacity, because with a manual stitch I can only increase it maybe 5 or 10%, no more than 20%, without any major distortions with the file, because with those manual stitches, the larger that I make it, every time I click my mouse button there's a needle penetration. So you're limited with those stitch types here with these manual stitches, and this is just for your information. Okay, and so sometimes with those, you may end up better changing those or going in and inserting running stitches with those, but just know if you're not going to do that, you are limited to how large you can make those without having to change those or redigitize those as running stitches. Another very, very important fact also. And so just keep that in mind with those particular stitch types here. And again, this is the C grade here, with the EMB grade here is C, and that's going to be with the if you go in, and let me get rid of this here, I'll delete this and this and this here. So now if I'm going to go in and open a file like this up and have it, and your original file may have multiple colors in it, so when I go in and open it up, I'm going to choose and make sure that the outlines and everything are selected. So I'm going to close this out here. Okay, so I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to open this file. And again, this is the C version here, and it's the DST file. So once I select this file here, once I select it, I'm not opening it up yet, I'm just selecting it. And the options tab here is now available for me to select as I left click on it here. And here I have an option here to go in, and I can adjust, I can turn on the outlines in objects here, and the auto connectors, I'm actually turning them on. Okay, and if I wanted to go in also at this particular point here, and I wanted to change the colors, because you can see the colors on the screen here that it's all of the colors kind of disappeared, and now it's just one color. Okay, because it's a pure stitch file, a pure data file is what this is here. Okay, so this is what we call, in fact, a stitch data file is what this is. Okay, and so with this, I just turned on the object, so I'm going to make this an object now file here that I can go in and use also, because I'm turning those on, okay, from my options. if I wanted to go in and define the stop sequence here, I can click define stop sequence. Now here is going to give you an option to go in, and if I know what the colors are, it's good to know what the colors are. I could actually go in and I could, if the first color here, let's say the first color was brown, I can go in, click brown, and I can assign the color like this. That's color number 1. If color number 2 was green, as I scroll down my list here, and if I knew what the color code was, I can put the color code in also. But let's just say that I'm just going to scroll and I'll choose this color here, 1850, and I'm going to assign a color. Okay. At any time I could assign a stop also as well. Okay. So right now, so once I go for my color number 3, as I scroll down here, let's say color number 3 was a, keep in mind you have access to your manufacturer's color here as far as your thread chart is here concerned also. If I click the down arrow here, I have all the list here of the thread manufacturers you can choose from also there as well, and that will help you as well. So if you know the color sequence, you can actually go in and you can do that. And let's say that the next color here is going to be, let's say it's going to be this color here. I'm going to assign that color. Okay, and the last color is, let's say we're going to make those red. So as I scroll down my list, if you know what the color code is, you can type it in. And I'm just scrolling here. I'm going to select, I can click find here. It's 1860. So I know what that color is here. I can go in and I can change that color here also. I can go in okay. As you select it, you can change the color of that also, like this. Once I'm done with this, I can just click OK here. And here I can also click OK. And once I click Open, it's going to come in those colors that I selected basically from my thread manufacturer's chart. So I can actually use that. And so that's another way that you can bring in these designs with the correct colors in them if you know what the color codes are. Okay, again, they're very important to know how to correctly bring these designs in without just clicking open and having them open up on your screen. Okay, so here I can go in, I could change my colors if I need to change my colors. So if those color codes, if you know what they are, again, you can type those in and you can use those and assign the colors to those. And again, this is the the grade C. Okay, the grade C will be a stitch file with objects and outlines turned on. Okay, very important to remember. Now, last but not least, we have the next one here, and I'm going to click on this one, and this is the design that comes in with no. And let me do this first here. I'm going to bring it in from scratch. So again, let's say I have a file that is a file that was sent to me, and I want to open this file up here. I'll go to File and I'll choose Open, and with this particular file here, as I go in, I will select that file here, and again, if I elect to just bring it in on the screen without going to Options and adjusting everything, if I'm just going to open it up, okay, if I choose Open like this is what's going to happen here when you bring this particular file in. Oops. That here, File, Open. Again, you got your D. I'm not going to click on Options. Okay, I'm just going to click Open. So whenever you do this, and that design comes in on the screen. Now let me get rid of those actually. And we have our D. This file is a DSD file. Again, if you just click open with this, you got this. Now, this particular file here, as we look at this, when you're bringing in those files, actually, what's happened here basically is that it remembers the last one that I brought in, and the last one that I brought in, I added the outlines and the objects. Okay, but watch what happens now when I go in and I do this again for the last time. Now, I'm going to go in. I'm going to choose open. Now, this time when I select it, I'm going to click on options. Notice, remember what I did the last time here. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to uncheck these. Okay. And as I uncheck those, I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to click OK and open. Okay. Now, what I want you to look at here is I want you to look at the color object list here. Everything in here, they're manual stitches. So if I select my design, if I choose reshape tool, it's going to look like this. Okay, every item in here, they're all manual stitches now. Okay, so your editing with this has gone even below the 10% mark here at this point here, because you can't go in and do any automated selections with this and change anything, because the manual stitches, there's no automation associated with the manual stitches. Okay, so and at this particular point here, you know, you're very limited here to what you can do to this particular file. All you can do, if you're going to add lettering to it at this size, you can add lettering to it at this size. Okay, but as far as going in and editing, changing the size 20%, now this is not going to happen with this file here. But you'll end up with lots of problems with this particular file here, because again, you get all manual stitches. So if I go in, I can't really assign anything here inside the automated object properties here, because they're all manual stitches, and this is what you see here. Okay, and so that's what happens when you go in. And I'm going to bring this back up again here with these turned on. Okay, it's thinking it's the same design. So try this here. Go to open. Have that selected here. My options. So with this one, as you're looking at this file here, just know that when you go in and you use this type of file, whenever you go in and you just click on open, this is what's going to happen if those outlines are not turned on actually. And let me close that one out. With those turned on, as I click OK and open this one, again, you have some ability here to do some editing with this, because everything is not a manual stitch when you bring it in. Again, the grade on this one, as you're looking at that, for this one, the grade is going to be C. If I bring in the other, you see the C here for the grade, and if I do it again and bring it in without the outlines turned on, okay, the grade is going to change to D. So once you go here now, that grade is D, and that's the worst as far as you being able to go in and edit and modify that design to get it ready for production. Again, the D is for objects and outlines. The objects and the outlines are turned off. This is just raw stitch data, and everything is a manual stitch, and this is the grade D. Okay, and so I've gone through and explained to you all of the different grades of the designs that you bring into your program, from the original EmbroideryStudio EMB file to the D here. That is the all the outlines and objects are turned off, and it's just raw stitch data. Okay, and when you see this, is nothing wrong with your software. It is just how this design is being interpreted when it comes into the program. Okay, and again, if you can get the EMB files, those are the best ones to have, because your editing capacity with those is unlimited actually. Okay, and with this D grade here, your editing capacity here is you really can't do anything but add text or something to it, or add something to it at this particular point. That's going to do it for our class today. And again, this is for the object data versus the stitch data that you bring into your program. We thank you for your time, and we ask that you visit us at www.wilcomamerica.com. Thank you. Have a good evening.